Welcome to the Health Catalyst podcast, brought to you by YPO. Here we talk about the business of health innovation, and I sit down with industry leaders who have been in the trenches. My goal is to share the lessons and provide practical and actionable advice to help you launch, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Rodrigo Hute. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Dugan Winkie. Dugan is the head of commercial strategy at Cedar, leading go-to-market for new product innovation and strategic planning for the company. Before Cedar, Dugan was an associate partner at McKinsey & Company and also an implementation executive at Epic. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about Cedar and how Cedar is transforming the patient financial experience in U.S. healthcare. Dugan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Rodrigo, for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about Cedar. You guys have, made a lot of positive noise in the industry over the last few years. So I'm excited to share your story with our audience. So let's start. Let's talk about Cedar. And Cedar has had an impressive journey so far in the health tech space over the last 7 years, 6-7 years, I think. So, tell our audience, what's Cedar? What is the company all about, and what was the initial problem that you set out to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start with, the problem is pretty apparent for anybody who has personally went through and navigated the healthcare financial experience themselves. So nearly everybody that we talk to has a personal experience where they have been confused about the billing experience. They have gotten mixed messaging. They have gotten a bill that they didn't understand, or two bills, one from the payer called an EOB saying this is not a bill, one from the provider, a third one from an anesthesiologist that you never met. So our founder, Florianato, actually had one of those experiences and, really dug into it a little bit more to look at why is this process so confusing? How can we eliminate some of the friction associated with it? And, ultimately, I think the initial problem statement was, if you look at the average healthcare provider, they're only collecting, call it 20 to 30 cents on the dollar that are owed to them by patients, right? And does that mean that 70% of patients don't want to pay their bill? Like, what we actually found is that answer is emphatically no. They are confused, they're hesitant, and they don't feel like their questions are being answered. So that was the original problem statement of Cedar, is how do we design a patient financial experience that is really seamless, simple, and personalized? I would say, however, and we'll get into this in a little bit, I believe, but the problem statement in our lens has expanded pretty drastically over the past few years, where we have an affordability crisis on our hands as it relates to healthcare finances. And if you look at the fact that the majority of privately employed employees are on a high deductible health plan, Medicaid redetermination, as well as self-pay increases of 20+%, we also have a much larger portion of patients who may have the intent to pay their bill, but they just don't have the funds. So we believe pretty firmly that we need to be addressing both of these spokes, reducing friction and providing additional sources of funding to help address affordability.
So your mission has evolved over time. You started with addressing the patient financial experience and confusion. And I can relate to that. Ever since I moved to the U.S., it's been weird experience every time I go to the doctor or to a hospital, and I get 3 different bills, and everything is super confusing. And it's very difficult to keep track of your payments as well. So I do understand that part. So you started with the patient in mind, but are your customers the patient, or are your customers the payer, the providers, the payers? How do you put everything together, given that healthcare has multiple stakeholders?
Yeah, exactly. So I would think of us as like a B2B2C company. So, how we actually deliver impact and results is through healthcare patients and consumers. However, our customers are providers as well as, staffing agencies, and multi-specialty groups where we are completely white labeled within the provider experience. So, your average consumer may be going through a Cedar financial experience, and not know it. But at the end of the day, our goal is to integrate in a highly omni-channel fashion and communicate with the patient outside of the EHR, integrated within the EHR, but all like white labeled, to the provider. So this helps, for our provider partners achieve that dual mission of both advancing consumerism goals and providing a delightful experience, as delightful as you can get when you're paying a bill. But we would argue that it's still pretty delightful, while simultaneously that engagement, manifests into more patients being able and willing to either pay their bill in total or sign up for a payment plan with flexible terms. So there's a very clear, financial ROI for the providers.
I see. I get it. So it's definitely a B2B2C model. You guys get paid by the providers. Providers are your customers, and then they deliver the value to the patient to improve the patient experience. Give us an example. Who would be a typical Cedar customer? And you mentioned that it's primarily or 100% white labeled. So give us an example of who would be someone that would benefit from Cedar's offerings.
Yeah, so we're actually, I think, touching about 30 million patients this year in aggregate. So we have certainly achieved some scale that we're very excited about, and in terms of like our typical partners, they tend to be large IDN enterprise health systems. So it varies pretty substantially. Our largest customer is a $25 billion plus organization across several states. But we also do have some regional health systems that have a much different need, right? Like they're really ingrained in the community that they serve, and feel this need to provide a resource and ultimately a delightful experience for the same people that they may interact with on a weekly basis. So kind of spanning that gambit, but as of right now, we have really focused our initial attention on that large enterprise provider and call it provider adjacent market.
Okay, so it's a large enterprise provider type of customers, health systems, hospitals, and so on. Did you make a deliberate decision that you would not target or focused on SMB providers like clinics, small groups, and so on, or do you also cater those type of customers as well?
It was a conscious decision in the early days, where I think a lot of startups kind of reach that inflection point of like, do we kind of build our product in a more agile, nimble way with SMB? Do we take a little bit longer, but really try to solve some of those unique needs for the enterprise market? I think a few different rationales for us in particular. We really wanted to kind of reach as many patients as possible fairly rapidly. So we don't think we would be able to get to that 30 million patients, in as fast of a manner as we have been able to today, with more of a SMB initial focus. And the reason why that's so important to us is, core to our product value prop is being able to create patient archetypes, personalize the experience, and experiment, to determine what is the best way to get patients to engage on their bill and their financial experience. So that was initially like our rationale. I would say, we are now looking at what is potentially some ways that we could go down market. I think critical to that is having like a scalable infrastructure on the back end where we can implement very rapidly and like reduce some of the call it operational like considerations and that would need to be able to be accomplished. One area in particular that we're having a lot of conversations is there a role in like channel partners, for instance, to help us go down market, where there's already a lot of these, end-to-end revenue cycle players who are heavily serving that demographic and that market segment. So is that like a viable option where we could reach, more patients in a more standardized manner as well?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Dugan, every company, especially every startup in the early days, face several inflection points and pivots and so on. What would you say have been, in Cedar's history, what have been the most relevant pivots that you've had to, face and made big decisions?
Yeah.
If you can share one or two, that would be great.
Yeah, there certainly have. It's been an exciting journey, but simultaneously, I think, and anytime you're talking about health tech, like I always come back to this idea of like focus, like organizational focus is so critical. And like in the early days, I think there was and remains so much opportunity that I think that the natural like knee-jerk inclination is to say, hey, this is adjacent to the patient financial experience and this process is broken. So like we should try to fix this. So maybe one example of that would be like pre-authorizations, right? Like huge pain point, definitely part of, the revenue cycle management. You can make an argument that it's kind of tied, to the patient financial experience. You could even go a little bit more removed from the patient and look at, coding, right? Like that's a pain point that is definitively a priority for revenue cycle, like providers and revenue cycle. But ultimately, like what we had to do was really think about there's a million things that we could be doing, but how do we remain focused on what our North Star is? And for us, like what that ultimately means is, the patient financial experience with the patient underlined. We feel like what has really been part of our differentiation, our secret sauce is, our ability to be a true consumer company and maximize engagement. So, one of our co-founders came from, the ad tech industry prior to Cedar, really focused on that. And I think we've kind of built that into our organizational DNA. So we don't want to set that to the side and say, okay, now we are, let's say a coding automation AI company. And I do think that's especially in like health tech, where there's no shortage of opportunity. It's easy to get distracted, and I think if you look at some of the more recent stories that haven't been like glowing successes, if you kind of backtrack it a few clicks further, I would argue that a lot of that root cause came from trying to do too much at a surface level versus remaining focused, going deep, and then expanding beyond that. But what I would say to maybe the second piece of that question, which is, give us a more specific example, I think like we're at like a very interesting pivot for us in the sense that we are really transitioning from being a single product company to a multi-product company. And we did kind of go through, I would say, a series of, pivot, persevere milestones over the past year as we really, tried to fine tune like what are going to be those pillar adjacent products that create our platform. And I think organizational discipline is important, but also, how do you build products that amplify your core product's value prop, while also making sure that as a package, they all work together. Like that has been, a key focus area. And I'm happy to kind of, go into what some of those products are in a little bit, but that would be like maybe a few examples off the cuff.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, and we'll get into the specific products and solutions that you offer in a second. But I think you touched on a critical point, which is focus. And I think that a lot of us, running companies, we have that temptation of, pursuing so many opportunities. How does a company like Cedar go through prioritizing and focusing on what you guys think it's the core or your core? Because in your specific field and sector, if you think about the patient billing journey and the patient payment journey, it's quite broad, and there are several steps throughout that journey. So, how do you guys choose, or what framework have you used to really prioritize in order to focus and keep you disciplined?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say,
is it more art or a science? That's kind of my question. Is there like and I know that you come from McKinsey and you did that for a long time. So, I really wonder, like, if a company like Cedar has been disciplined and you have been very successful, like I'm sure that you guys have gone through a prioritization process to say, okay, we have all these opportunities out there in the market. This is the patient, journey for billing, payments, and so on. Yeah. How do we narrow our focus to be able to go deep? Like tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So like a true consultant, I'll say it depends. But no, yeah. I do think it's a bit of both art and science. And I think you need to be really diligent on the process side of the science. Like, are we chasing anecdotal feedback that we have heard from two of our customers, but we haven't really done like a deep market scan? We haven't established like true product market fit. So there's like some structural things that I think you can hold yourself accountable to that fall into more of like the science side of the equation. But the art piece, I think, is really tied to the flexibility and like being willing to jettison, convictions that maybe you had, and you have a solid business case that tells you that this should be a rock star success. But like at the end of the day, it's incredibly hard to generalize like the provider market. Like that's one of the things that we hit is, we'll have a new product or a feature that just knocks it out of the park at provider partner A. And then we don't see like that same level of results at provider B. So a lot of the art is understanding the why behind that, because there's so many things that are unique provider to provider. Like, what is their payer mix? Where are they geographically oriented? Like, an interesting anecdote that we have found is, our provider partners in the Midwest, like, have generally higher collection rates, right? Like, why is that? Like, you can extrapolate and say like, well, like there may be some, mentality differences or, orientation. It could be, that there's differences in terms of the amount of commercial insured, right? There's a myriad of like what contributor factors that I think you need to peel back the onion. But how I would say like how we do this, like what are some frameworks that we typically look at? I would say I usually personally like start by asking myself a few key questions, right? Like first is always competitive moat. Like what would this product or feature, different, how would we be differentiated and have a competitive moat, not just now against existing direct competitors, but also new entrants, which is, I think, common across every industry, right? The one thing that I would say is like fairly unique within healthcare is the second question, and admittedly may sometimes be the first question, is what are these incumbent system of record EHRs, going to do over time? Because it is a real, competitive threat, especially for, new market entrants, where there is a very ingrained, loyal, system of record vendor in place. And, that personally is like one of our North Stars is like, we absolutely think there is a role and a, important place for EHRs. But we also think that there are these gaps where maybe that is not going to be their top priority, but it is a major consumer friction point. So like that's the type of innovation that would get us very excited is, I'll just use like one example. So let's do a fully digitized, Medicaid application that we can surface to patients. Like there's many existing workflows around Medicaid. Financial assistance has been around for decades and decades, but it is challenging to go and create API integrations with all of the states so that you can digitally submit a Medicaid application, right? And it is unlikely that that is necessarily something that an enterprise EHR system would be interested in doing. So for us, like that's the kind of opportunity where if we look at like the tailwinds, we know that self-pay patients are growing at a very rapid clip. We know that this is having a larger and larger impact on a provider's bottom line. And we know that, there is likely, reduced competitive risk, either from market entrants or existing system of records. that gets exciting for us. Now the second kind of piece of that framework becomes how do we evaluate what success would look like if we were to invest? And I think one of our early lessons learned was we equated a good idea with a solid business case and commercial momentum as like success. Whereas now, like we really have a much more diversified approach. First off is, product market fit. Is this solving a problem that matters at the end of the day to our partners? And are they willing, to ultimately, partner with us on it? But like, we can't stop there. I think the second metric is the value side of the equation. So are we, like what we kind of use as our North Star is, are we delivering a minimum of 3x ROI? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, like, what is that value? And is that value, what is most important, right, to our target, partners at the end of the day? And then finally, like, I think, another dimension is really scalability. So we all know change is hard in healthcare, right? So how easy is this to implement? How many resources does it require on our end? But more importantly, how many resources does it require from our provider partners? Because we know that all of the IT teams have a backlog of 2 years plus, and all three of those kind of components in our mind, like really need to be, those boxes need to be checked in order for us to say that, yes, this is achieving the success that we set out to at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's talk about your products, Cedar's products. So can you walk us through your core offerings and what would you say is your flagship product?
Yeah. So Cedar Pay is definitely our flagship product. And really at the end of the day, what we do is we will completely own all omni-channel billing, outreach, post-adjudication, bill payment. So once that bill that is ready for the patient, and that could be a self-pay patient, it could be balance after insurance, all of that is really driven by Cedar in a highly personalized way. And that's really what we have, built our foundation off of. So what does that mean? First off, we don't have any usernames or login. Somebody will receive our engagement in literally 3 clicks. They could pay their bill via Apple Pay or Google Pay. And that would kind of gets back to that original mission of just minimize the friction. For those who have a $30 copay and just want to pay their bill and be done with it, let's make it as easy for them as possible. Where I think the personalization comes in is, that patient who just has a $30 copay is very different than a patient who has a $5,000 deductible and just recently graduated college and had to have knee surgery, right? Like they're questioning, how am I going to afford this? Like, am I going to be sent to collections? So we need to really personalize how we are engaging with that patient. And, ultimately, like our messaging to that patient will be, we're here to help. Like we have financial resources at our disposal. Let us see if you qualify for any aid packages. Let us see what the maximum flexibility is that we can offer you in terms of an extended length payment plan. Or if it's a self-pay patient, for instance, we actually have like a machine learning driven algorithm that optimizes what is that amount of self-pay discount that we want to offer, and how do we tie that to a specific action and a specific timeline. So that hopefully just paints a little bit of the picture on the personalization side. And then the third bucket is really around bringing in players and ecosystem, such as payers, HSA, banks, et cetera, into the patient financial experience. So we have EOB matching, real-time deductible status, as well as HSA. HSA balance sharing as well as payment, because those are questions that patients typically have, but they oftentimes have to go to 3 different parties. So our vision is really to combine all of those into one centralized platform.
Okay, I get it. How do you deal with HIPAA, for example? If normally, my understanding is that the reason why it can be complicated to make payments in the health industry is like you have to have a username, you have to have a login to be able to access your private information, and everything it's kept, under strict, rules because of HIPAA and so on. How do you deal with that to make payments so easy with 2 or 3 clicks, as you mentioned earlier? And then the second part of the question is like, what data are you using that you're allowed to use in order to personalize the patient experience?
Yeah. On the first question, absolutely, right? Like this is a heavily regulated industry, and the way that we have navigated this is to kind of have two workflows. One workflow where we're not displaying any PHI. So for instance, if you just want to have a $30 copayment, we can say, here's your name, here's what you owe, but we're not displaying any clinical information, and allow an accelerated checkout experience. Mm-hmm. However, if you want to actually learn more about the bill details, we do have like a two-factor authentication workflow that is not a username and password, but it does satisfy like HIPAA regulations and compliance considerations. Mm-hmm. So that would be like the first piece there. Is how do we do that in a safe manner?
Yeah, sounds good. And in terms of personalization, like to what extent can you personalize the patient experience? Yeah. What kind of data are you able to use, and what type of data are you not allowed to use to personalize your products?
Yeah, we have. So part of it, our personalization engine is leveraging the behaviors and interactions that we have observed over our entire consumer base. So again, we're touching about 30 million patients, and we will do I would say probably about 200 plus enhancements a year, largely driven by A/B testing, where we're optimizing like what we're communicating, when we're communicating, how we're communicating. And sometimes this is going to be, overarching across our customer base. Other times, like our partners will come to us. Actually, like that's where some of our most interesting experiments have been. Has been provider A that is really confused why patient in this area behaves in this manner, and like they spark the idea of an experiment. But ultimately, we are leveraging our own data interactions as well as some of the data, just like basic, patient demographics that we're getting from the health systems. We're not like purchasing any, third-party data that we're using to personalize the experience right now. So it's predominantly around, A/B experimentation, how patients interact, and then ultimately creating some of these archetypes based on, common patient profiles that we've observed over the past decade or so.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for that. The other question I had was, you mentioned that in some instances, some patients get a huge bill and they, face the affordability issue, and they might not be able to pay it right away. Do you guys offer a product around financing? Like, if you think about, I'm forgetting about the name of this company, but the pay now, pay later type of thing.
Yeah, buy now, pay later. Yeah.
Buy now, pay later type of programs. Are you using those kind of financial programs at all?
We're currently exploring it. So what we have found historically was the majority of our customers, providers, had a preference to just leverage their in-house payment plans. So we've really optimized all of our payment plans around this idea of, it is really being administered by us, but by proxy of the provider. I would say, like, we've seen the market shift a little bit more, and I think there's a few reasons. One of which is bill sizes are getting higher and higher, and the only way that patients can afford these large bills are by extending the payment plan durations, and it is it's financially challenging for providers to administer a 2 to 3 year payment plan, right? So I would say, like, we are looking at kind of more discrete financing integrations and partners that would fit into our platform. I think the key thing here is how do we actually make this a win for the patient at the end of the day? Because one of the concerns that we've heard is we don't want this to just be interest accruing payment plans that are passed down to the patient. Like at a minimum, we need to have interest-free options with longer durations, as well as those in-house payment plans that we currently offer to give healthcare consumers really the choice to decide what is the best option for their needs.
Okay, got it. Is Cedar's business model designed around a SaaS type of platform where they pay a monthly fee or an annual fee for being able to use your software platforms, like Cedar Pay, for example? Or is your model based around every time someone pays, Cedar gets a percentage, like a take rate or a transaction fee? How would you describe your business model?
Yeah, it's more the latter. So we have a contingency model, and we back that up with a performance guarantee, which is not really typical in the industry, where if we're not delivering financial improvements above and beyond our contingency fee rate, we will refund the difference. So we're extremely proud that that is not a case that we have encountered, and simultaneously proud of the impact that we've been able to drive for providers. But like at the end of the day, as opposed to just a SaaS model, like we believe strongly that we should be mutually incentivized, to help provide the best possible financial experience for patients, and ultimately also help with collections too.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a transaction fee model then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let me go to the final section of today's episode, and I would love to talk about growth. Revenue growth, commercial strategy, go-to-market strategy, and you are the guy for that. And you are the head of commercial strategy, and you have a unique perspective on how Cedar has been, taking your products to market. So how would you describe Cedar's current go-to-market approach?
Yeah, I think it's ever evolving, but right now, I think something that is more recent for us is taking a longer term lens towards growth. So historically we have always kind of had more of a traditional annual planning process where we are looking at investments that we're going to make over the next year. What is going to be the return on those investments? Not to say we weren't thinking about a longer term horizon, but like the structural components were much more on like the annual side. So we recently have released a 3-year company-wide strategy, and we use that term fairly diligently, in the sense that like oftentimes we think of you are a technology company, like you have a strategy, that's your product strategy, right? And like product strategy, incredibly important, but coupled to that is, what is your commercial strategy? What is your go-to-market strategy? What is your channel strategy? What is your delivery strategy? So really tying all of those together, because we found that there's a lot of intricacies there that you really need to think about cohesively. The other thing that I think this has opened up for us is thinking about investments on a slightly longer term horizon. So if we are looking at a metric of success for 3 years, for instance, that means that maybe the ROIC at the end of year 1 is not there, but that's okay, because this is a 3-year bet. So it kind of buys us a little bit of time to tackle some meatier problems that we know are going to take have a slightly longer time horizon to ultimately pay off. So those would be kind of a few things, but I would say, in short, like we go through a process where we're updating that 3-year company strategy. That leads into annual planning, where we're going to be identifying those big rocks, those 2 to 3 big rocks, where we are going to be investing in growth and staffing up go-to-market and product squads against it. And then, that obviously drives, the resourcing and the OKR development and the performance management. So, I always like to think of it as, one of those like continuous improvement circles where, if you're doing it right, like the cycle never ends, and it's all interconnected.
So would you say that you made a conscious decision of having a longer term view, like 3-year time horizon, because of your target market definition, meaning enterprise customers, and those customers could, the sales cycle to acquire one of those customers, it's a longer cycle. Is that the reason why you have a longer kind of planning period, from a commercial standpoint, or why would you say that?
I think that is part of it. We know change is hard in healthcare, and it takes time. Like going back to that network ecosystem that we talked about, where we are bringing in payer data, we are bringing in HSA banks, right? Like those partnerships took years, and it was not easy. So I think that is a component of it. I think the second piece of it is, as we look at some of our big aspirational priorities, and like generative AI being one of them, where we see like multiple horizons of how this is going to be really integrated into our product. And those horizons are going to happen over multiple years. So like we should be thinking about that investment and, why it is important and what is going to be like the return on that, not just for that first use case that we're prioritizing for this year, but that is going to be then the bedrock that unlocks, additional functionality in years 2 and 3.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you think about metrics and KPIs within the commercial organization, and you have your weekly meetings, I'm sure that you have weekly, metrics reviews, you have your monthly business reviews, you have your, your quarterly business reviews, and so on. Like, what are some of your North Star metrics, KPIs that you normally look at, to, assess your performance?
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of the key ones. I think like in particular though, like we have introduced a new framework for some of our go-to-market priorities, like called like Pivot Persevere, and that was, just given change is hard. It takes a long period of time to build something. It takes an even longer period of time to assess, whether or not it's working. So my goal has always been like, how do we shorten that? And how do we move in a more agile fashion? But also like, what are some of those early indicators of success that will give us confidence that we are on the right track? So we have this is actually something that's incredibly important. It's also very cross-functional between engineering, product, commercial, where we all get together and talk about, hey, by the end of Q1, we said if this product was going to be on track for being GA by H2, here's what we would have had to do. And that could have commercial milestones. It could have, product value milestones. But, we need to have that tough conversation cross-functionally and like really hold ourselves accountable. I think the flip side of that is, key to a startup is agility. So I think one thing that we're always conscious of is, let's not add too much process, right, at the end of the day. So how do we ensure that we are pulling these people together to make a decision? but not necessarily just pulling in 50 stakeholders so that everybody, feels like they are aware of where we are. And, that's going to be constant friction in any company. But, I'm a pretty firm believer that, our main competitive advantage is that, we are smaller, we are agile, we are more nimble, and we need to do everything in our power not to lose that.
And how do you think about product performance? I mean, when you launch a new product or a new feature, you mentioned earlier that one of the key things that you pay attention to it's product market fit, for example, or how much value that new product is delivering to the customer. How do you define success when you launch a new product, a new feature? For example, if product market fit is a key metric for you, every company can define the product market fit in different ways. What is your definition or Cedar's definition for determining if something is really working?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what is the problem that you're trying to solve. So Cedar support is one of our newer products that we're going to be releasing next year, which is really around how do we help reduce the cost burden for providers and provide additional automation via empathetic call center represented. So what does that actually look like? We're going to have like an AI voice agent that can be that first layer of triage for some of these low-hanging fruit where a patient just has a question about their bill or really needs an itemized statement. And this is not going to be like the old IVRs of the past where you just hammer 0 to get to a real person. It's true conversational AI built from our LLM that we've been iterating on. But going back to your original question, like how do we assess that success? I think it's what is the problem it is trying to resolve? And it's, are we able to answer questions from patients, right? Like if we build this and we think it's flashy and it's highly conversational, but at the end of the day, it's not answering those patients' questions, and they all get redirected to the call center at the end of the exchange, then that's a failure, right? So I think identifying what those metrics are is incredibly important, and then the second piece, which is also challenging for providers, is how do we measure incremental improvement? Because reporting is just a pain point. Establishing a baseline is a pain point. So that's an area that we spend a lot of time on for some of our newer products, is like working with our partners to say, all right, can we all agree this is where the performance level was prior to Cedar? And then that unlocks measuring that incremental benefit. But if you don't do that first step, then it's very hard to say, look, we're improving. So both components, right metrics, but also right measurement criteria are equally important.
Yeah, that makes sense. From a go-to-market perspective, you sell your products to enterprise healthcare customers, health systems, and so on, providers. So what are your key channels in terms of taking new products to market? Are you focused on direct sales? I would imagine that not so much inside sales, because we're talking about enterprise customers. Are you spending most of your time building partnerships with other vendors? So how do you sell? How do you take products to market?
Yeah, I would say predominantly, in-house, we have a great partnership team, and, given, we are serving the enterprise market, like these are heavily like relational, like trust-based relationships. So they just don't lend themselves to, more of an outsourced approach, frankly. We also believe it's really important to have people who understand what it's like to operate within a healthcare system. Like if you look at some of the big tech entrants, like that's been a large contributor of like why it ultimately hasn't taken off is, there are some unique regulatory, cultural dynamics within health systems, and you really need somebody who understands our product, but also equally important, understands, your respective health system. We are looking more closely at like what could be some like interesting channel partnerships. There's a few different avenues there, but if you look at some of the traditional like end-to-end revenue cycle providers where they come in and will more or less like run your entire revenue cycle from pre-service to post-service. Like they have a similar incentive as us, which is how do we engage with patients in a ideal manner and ultimately prioritize collection simultaneously. So we are looking at, is there a way to kind of have a many to one integration where we can integrate with some of these channel partners as a premium offering that they can then offer to their customer base, which we think could be an intriguing commercial avenue to pursue. But yeah, those are kind of the two main pillars right now, just given where we are. And we're excited.
Yeah, so it's if I understand correctly, you have an internal sales team that builds relationships directly with your customers, and then you also have some channel partnerships to expand and scale your offerings as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Good. When you think about commercial innovation, what do you see in the future? What are some of the things that excites you the most? Looking ahead for the next couple of years, what are some of the things that you really want to do leading commercial strategy? Is it AI? Is it new delivery models? Is it new types of partnerships? What are the things that you have top of mind right now?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be a true healthcare technologist if I didn't say I was so excited about generative AI, right? Like, it's certainly the topic du jour. But honestly, I am very excited. But I'm excited because, we are looking at this very much from like a problem first lens. I think my cautionary tale is it seems like there are a lot of solutions out there seeking a problem. And that could be like very problematic over the long run. Whereas we have spent, the past 7+ years with a very discrete problem looking for a solution. And I think what generative AI allows us to do is continue that journey of personalization. So we talked about how we personalize the experience. Now we can do that in a two-way conversational dialogue where, let's say a patient has a large bill that they can't afford. Like, we want to engage that patient and understand like what would make this bill affordable? Is it the balance that just needs to come down? Is it needs to be spread out over time? Do we see that you qualify for a pharmacy copay assistance program, right? Like all of those, it's almost like, you need to ask probing questions and you need to learn more about the patient and their motivations and their needs. And we think generative AI like has a major role in that. So where we are starting on our end is called Cedar Support, which is how do we help the call center operate more efficiently, effectively, and empathetically at the end of the day. So what we found, this is a real stat, by the way, we do these AI automation assessments with our provider partners where we will ingest call recordings and tell them to the degree what percent we think could have been automated. And we did this for a provider and found that only 3% of patients were calling in with a clear intent to pay, meaning that 97% of these calls which are thousands and thousands per day for a large health system, just have questions. And those questions could be, I don't understand what coinsurance is. Like, what is an HSA? Why do I need an itemized statement? Can I get an itemized statement, right? Like these are low-hanging fruit that will allow call center operators and representatives to really operate at the top of their license, which is helping patients with those more complicated use cases. So that's kind of like wave one when we're thinking about Cedar support. We also think wave two is a much more intelligent outbound strategy. That could be, two-way texting. It could be outbound, AI voice agent phone calls. But we're from our early testing, it's extremely exciting. Where we have a high degree of confidence based on some of our alpha researching that like we can automate up to 30% of inbound calls to start, while furthering our personalization vision over time. So for us, that's like problem solution. And, we think it's a really good use case for us that nobody is doing today right now, which presents opportunity.
I love it. I think that's a great future project, or and very much needed. So yeah, I'm excited about that one. I mean, I have a lot of questions every time I go to the doctor or a clinic or something. So and everybody has tons of questions. It's very confusing. So having something like that to help you get answers, fairly quickly, that would definitely improve the patient experience for sure. All right, Dugan, we are at the end of today's interview. Thank you so much for being here today with us. Thank you for sharing your journey with Cedar. You guys are certainly building something amazing. So thanks for your time, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. So until the next time, thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Very happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.